Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live show today. I hope you're having a great weekend. You can share the video, you can invite a friend. Let's grow together. Today, we're talking about values and money. Values aren't just an intellectual or philosophical exercise. Values define concrete goals, which ultimately translates into how you spend your time each and every day. Now and in the future, which has tremendous ramifications for your life. Thoughtfully exploring your money values can help you be mindful of how you spend and invest, bringing your financial life into alignment with what's most important to you. When your finances are aligned with your values, there's often clarity and resolve when investing in a short, medium, and long-term goals. Today, joining us is Themba. We're all familiar with who Themba is. Welcome, Themba, and thank you for your time and for joining us. Themba, do you have any news from this past week for our viewers?
Yes, I do, Tafadzo. I'm looking forward to the discussion on money and values because it's not something that we normally think about. But I hope our viewers and our listeners today will be challenged to really reflect on the money beliefs that they have. I'm going to bring up a quote later on what a non-writer said, but it's been proven time and time again that your values will essentially determine your financial destiny. And the core of what we're trying to communicate today is that make sure that your values are aligned with how you spend your money. But you've asked me, Tafadzo, to just bring to the attention of our viewers any news in in this past week. There are four news items that I would want to talk about. The first news item is the interest rate announcement by the South African Reserve Bank. So as you know, every 2 months, the Monetary Policy Committee of the South African Reserve Bank meets and they decide on the level of interest rates. So they met in this past week, and they decided to keep the rate the same. So the repo rate, as they call it, is at 8.25%. So what that means is that interest rates in South Africa have remained at a 15-year high. So in the past 15 years, interest rates have not been this high in South Africa. So if the repo rate is 8.25%, what it means is that the prime rate for banks in South Africa it remains unchanged at 11.75%. But there are two things that I would want to mention here. The first thing that I would want to mention is that the decision was not unanimous. So the MPC is basically a committee of 6 people. So 4 people preferred an unchanged stance, and then 2 people preferred a reduction of 25 basis points. So the first thing that I would want to mention is that it's very likely that in their next meeting in September or even in the meeting in November, they may actually start reducing rates. It's not guaranteed, but it's very, very likely. What it means is that we are entering or we are expecting the cutting cycle of rates to really begin now. So that's the first thing that I would want to mention. The second thing that I would want to mention is that the cutting of interest rates is dependent on data, as the governor of the central bank would always say. So what we need to do in managing our funds is let's pay our debt to the extent possible. So our advice is if you've got extra cash, please prioritize the reduction of your debt. The second thing that I would want to mention is a survey that was done by FNB. FNB is one of the biggest banks in South Africa. So they released their retirement insight survey for 2024. And that report which they received, they released is really based on a sample of slightly more than 1,000 of their customers. I found 4 things interesting from that report. The first thing that I found interesting is that 48% of South Africans under 60 have no plan in place for their retirement. And the reason why they don't have a plan in place for their retirement is because immediate financial responsibilities are taking precedence. So what that means is that when they retire, they basically will have to rely on their kids. So I found that very interesting. Nearly half of South Africans under the age of 60 have no plan in place for their retirement because they are dealing with day-to-day issues. The second thing that I found very, very interesting is that the other half of the respondents to this survey, they said that they had been able to save towards retirements through cutting costs, through living within their means and focusing on paying off their debt. And they have also had, other streams of income. So we essentially have a situation where half of South Africans have no plan in place. The other half do have a plan in place. And the reason why they have had a plan in place is because they are cutting on their costs, they are making sure that they are living within their means, and they are prioritizing the payment of debts. I'm sure because you've been listening to us for a long time, you would want to be in the other half of South Africans. The other thing that I found is very, very interesting is that the rising cost of living is eroding people's ability to save and plan for retirement. And what came out of that survey is that many people are expecting to work beyond their retirement age, right? So that I found very interesting. So if when FNB tried to ask the 48% of South Africans who do not have a retirement plan, the reason that they gave, which to me is really an excuse, is that the rising cost of living is eroding their ability to save and to plan for retirement. And those individuals actually indicated that they plan to work beyond their retirement age. So what should we do with such information? Obviously, the first thing is have a plan for retirement and do what the other 50% are doing. Cut your costs, live within your means, prioritize the payment of debts, and also develop other stream of incomes. That's a proven failure. That's a proven formula, sorry, to guarantee your financial sustainability. So that's the first thing that I would want to highlight. The second thing that I would want to highlight is for you to retire comfortably, you would need to save at least 15% of your income, at least 40 years of your working life. So that's the non-formula. So if on a monthly basis, you are not saving at least 15% of your income, then there is every likelihood that you may not be able to retire comfortably. Remember what we said last week, 6% of South Africans are able to retire comfortably, which is very, very important. And the other thing that I would want to highlight is that for you to retire comfortably, you need 3/4 of what you had prior to retirement. So what it basically means is that if your income was 100 rands before retirement, you would need an income of at least 75 rands to sustain you through retirement. I would also want to bring to our attention what we have said in previous shows. All research is showing us that people will, in only likelihood, live longer than we have lived in the past generations. So it would be sad if you are living longer and then you are running out of money. The third thing, Tafazo, that I would want to say, before I say this, let me ask you a question, Tafazo. Does money buy happiness? In other words, is it true that the more money you have, the happier you are? What do you think, Tafazo? Does money buy happiness? Is it guaranteed that when you have money, you will be happier?
Uh, Thank you very much for the question. Money does not buy happiness, but it gives you options. I remember at the time when I used to do Herbalife, and there was this guy who presented Cardozo. He had um, all the riches that he had acquired, and he used to say, "I would rather be rich than poor." It's better to have problems, but with money, it makes life much, much easier. And I guess maybe it also makes you happier. So I think money gives you options. It's better to have problems, but with money.
I like your view, Tafadzwa. So the reason why I asked that question is that a new study was published in the past week. And this is a study that was conducted by a senior fellow at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. His name is Matt Killingsworth. He's been doing this study over the past few years. And what he found out in this study is a positive correlation between money and happiness. So I know people have got their view, but this guy has been collecting data from before 2020. So he's been 2010, sorry. So he's been collecting data for the past 14 years. And he's been collecting data for people with various incomes. And the data which he released in the past week has shown that, has shown two things. The first thing is that people with money are happier than people who do not have money. That's quite obvious. That's quite obvious. But I think the study goes on to reveal, because it's basically categorizing people based on their income. And one of the things that his study shows is that the happiness gap between wealthy people and middle income participants was actually wider than the gap between your middle income participants and low income participants. What that means in simple terms is that people that are wealthy or that are ultra wealthy are actually happier than middle income people. That's really what it means. The significance of his study was that it seems to go against a previous study that he had done in 2010. In his previous study, he had actually found that happiness indeed rises with income, but at a certain income level, the level of happiness sort of plateaus. In other words, beyond a certain level, and the level that he established was 75,000 US dollars. So beyond that level, even if you get more money, you won't be happier. So that was the previous wisdom from a previous study. But what this current study has now established is that there is no plateauing of happiness. So even if you get an income beyond that 75,000, you will be happier. In other words, there is no plateauing. The more money you have, even if you get to a stage where you are ultra wealthy, you will be happier than if you were not making that much money. So we need to answer the question, why is the study showing that rich people are happier? Right. And the way that he has tried to answer that question relates to the fact that if you've got lots of money, you've got a greater feeling of control over life. In other words, the more money you have, the more control you have over your life. In other words, you've got more freedom to live the life that you have always wanted to live. And this has always been my argument. The greatest freedom that you can have in life is a freedom with money. Because let us be honest, if you've got a limited amount of money, there are things that you would want to do which you cannot do. There are things, there's a certain kind of potential that you're supposed to bring to the fore, to exhibit in life, but you can't fully express yourself because you've got limited financial resources. And so, Tafazo, the long and short of it is that I agree with this study. Money brings happiness. The more money you have, so don't be like those people who believe that the more money you have, the more troubles you have. You know, there are people who've got an embedded belief, which is what we'll be talking about today. They've got this wiring within their brain that number one, money is the root of all evil. That number two, the more money you have, the more problems you have. That's not supported by research. And research is actually showing us that even if you've got lots of money, you will be happier than if you've got a limited amount of money. Then the fourth thing that I would want to ask to talk about, Fadzwa, this I found very, very, and I'm just bringing it just because I want just us to generate some discussion around that. Tafadzwa, you would know that last weekend, the aspiring president, the former president of the US, Donald Trump, was actually shot. In other words, there was a attempted assassination on his life. What I have found interesting is that you know that Trump founded a company called Trump Media and Technology, group, which we've spoken about in previous on previous shows. What I found interesting is that I think he was shot on a Sunday. On the Monday, when he was shot, the share price of his company actually increased by 30%. In fact, I think at one stage, his shares actually skyrocketed to something like 70%. I just found it very, very interesting. This is a man who nearly died and survived, but it seems out of that experience, he's actually richer than the day before he was shot. I just found that very, very interesting. Obviously, shares go up and down, but that's the one thing that you may not know about the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. On the Monday, the share price, I think is now worth something like 5 billion, on this particular, based on the shares that he has in Trump Media. I just found that interesting, Tafadza. But let's move on. Over to you.
Well, from what you've just said, I actually believe that you attract money. I think there's this teaching that you don't pursue money, you attract money. Because some in their problems, they still make money. Like as you're saying about Trump. Well, I also believe that as the Bible says, that money answereth all things, because without money, anyway, Tendai here is commenting that I believe misery in a rich person comes from how the person is getting his money. If it's from some scary ritual, you will not find joy even if you have the money. Peace and joy comes from clean money that is well planned for when it comes to satisfaction and joy. So that's the comment from Tendai there regarding whether money brings joy, whether money brings happiness. If you have any comments, let's keep on posting our comments on the comment section. If you also have any questions that are relevant to what we're discussing, you can also just post them in the comment section. Our book of the week is It's Not About the Money, a financial game plan for staying safe, sane and calm in any economy, by Brent Kessel, a top financial advisor in the United States. What are some of the lessons that you've learned from this book, Themba?
So before I talk about this book, Tafadza, let's just remind our viewers that we encourage people to read quite a lot. In fact, I've gotten into the habit of reading one book per week. And so the book that I've been reading in this week is It's Not About the Money. It's a book that was written by a guy called Brent Kessel. Brent Kessel is one of the top wealth advisors in the US. But not only that, he actually founded a company that we'll talk about, later on. And this company is managing quite huge sums of money. So he's the co-founder of that particular, company. In fact, most of what we'll talk about today, Tafadzo, is actually based on this book. So the topic for today is money and values, something that he actually talks about. So in his book, Brent recounts, how the money stories, experiences, and hurts of his youth were unconsciously affecting his financial decision making as an adult. He actually saw that he was basing many of his money decisions on the insecurities that he has had in the past, rather than the security of knowing who he was, today. So that's the first light bulb that went on after reading the book. Unconsciously, Tafadzwa, the way we spend money is actually informed by the values that we have about money. In those values and beliefs that we have about money, we're actually shaped by experiences that we have had when we were growing up. For example, if you grew up and the one thing that your parents were actually telling you is money does not grow on trees, you will always have a scarcity mentality in your life. And because you've got a scarcity mentality, you're actually afraid to spend money. You're actually fearful that the money may go, away, and you may actually not have the value of wealth creation in terms of building assets, because wealth creation is about building, assets. And so remember what we've said in the past. There are two emotions that you must avoid when you're dealing with money. It's fear and it's about greed. And the money decisions that you actually make is informed by the values that you have. And some of those values, sometimes which do not promote wealth creation, were shaped inside of us unconsciously when we were growing up. So that realization has caused him to question how little we reflect on our foundational experience, and how those foundational experiences in our youth, when we were children, can still play a prominent role in our adult life. In fact, it's quite true, Tafadzo, that most of the money beliefs that we have were actually unconsciously deposited in us between the age of 0 and 9. And if you want to really accumulate wealth and be successful, sometimes you need to rewire yourself and begin to question some of the money beliefs. For example, you cannot make money if you've got a scarcity mentality. You can't make money if you're like, hey, money does not grow on trees. You won't make money. If you're afraid of losing money, you won't make money. So by the way, Brent is a psychologist. So when he talks about it's not about the money, he's basically saying that our beliefs, what we think about money shapes, what we do. And a clear example of this, Tafadzwa, is when I look at your budget. Your budget is a reflection of the values that you have about money, whether you like it, or not. And just to say something that is interesting, Tafadzwa, I've listened to so many preachers, preach about money. And sometimes I've really wondered, you would find a preacher who wears shiny shoes, a preacher who wears, bling, bling suits and that kind of thing. And you're really wondering, what is this all about? If you investigate deeper, about their teachings and about their view on money, you will most of the time come to the conclusion that their beliefs about money, even the prosperity thinking that they have about money, is actually shaped by their childhood and their real beliefs about money. For example, I've seen so-called prophets sometimes displaying money. I'm not going to mention names, and I'm wondering, wealthy people don't do these things. What is this all about? And you'll begin to understand that some of these people maybe grew, and their childhood was characterized by scarcity. And because their childhood was characterized by scarcity, they have got this innate desire to flaunt their wealth before people and to show that they have arrived. Something that does not happen with the real billionaires who actually have got money, because I have studied real billionaires. they don't flaunt their wealth. They don't put on bling bling clothes. And I've always wondered, what is this all about? So when he was seeking clarity on this very thing, Brent then came up with what we are going to look at today, which are financial archetypes. What he basically says is that he came up with 8 financial archetypes. He basically says that, look, these archetypes basically reflect our money values. For example, some people have got a value of money of saving. They are savers. Some people, want to be stars. We'll talk about the financial archetypes, later on. And I ended up taking a quiz on his website. By the way, the company that he founded is called Abacus World. So you can also go to his website and take his financial archetype quiz. And when I took his quiz, I found that one of my financial archetypes is I'm an empire builder. An empire builder is somebody who wants to build assets. And because I'm an empire builder, most of the money decisions that I actually make, go into accumulating assets and that kind of thing. So that's what this book is all about. This book is about, it's not about the money. It's about the values and beliefs that you have about money, and then those values and beliefs that you have about money dictate your financial destiny. So our thought for the week, Tafadzwa, I know you have not asked me, but this is a thought that I would want us to reflect on today. This is a statement that was shared by somebody that I have read his books. His name is, Dr. John DeMartini. He actually made a statement which basically says the hierarchy of your values, and here we're also talking about money values, will dictate your financial destiny. So the hierarchy of your values will dictate your financial destiny. If you've got prosperity thinking as your values, in other words, you're a bling bling kind of person, those kinds of people don't build money that lasts and goes into the other generation. But people that tend to grow money over time are people that have got a wealth accumulation value. Those people delay gratification, and that has been proven over time. And let me just share with you one of the simplest way to actually find out what your values are about money. And here is the simple way to find out what your values are about money. If I were to give you 10 million US dollars today, and I ask you to write a list in maybe 60 seconds, what you would do with that money. If you've got a group of people, they will tell you different things of what they're going to do with money. Somebody will say, oh, I will buy the car of my dreams. Another person will say, no, I will build my mother a house. Another person will say, oh, I will buy shares in this particular company. When you ask a group of people what they will do with that 10 million, their answers will reflect the values that they have about money. If you see an individual who say, I will buy the clothes that I have always wanted to buy, I will show off to people that I'm also successful and I've got money, I will buy the cars of my dream. Those kinds of people do not have a wealth accumulation value. They don't. They have got a value that has to do with being celebrated. They want to be the star of the party. And those kinds of values are not consistent with wealth accumulation. Then there are people who say, I will help my mother and build a house. That's a good value, but that value may not be consistent with wealth accumulation. There is no right or wrong when it comes to value. But what we're basically saying is get the time to know your money beliefs and your money values, because your money values will dictate your financial destiny. The people that will accumulate wealth over time are people that have got a value of building assets. So if you were to get 10 million US dollars today, if you find the individual that says, I will invest that money on the stock exchange, that's why sometimes, Tafadzwa, Come across people that have made money. They leave this money to their children and they inherit those money. If the children do not have the same values as they have, they will plunder all that wealth within a generation and nothing will be left. And so the hierarchy of your values dictates your financial destiny. And the other thing that we're saying in this show is that make sure that there is an alignment between your values and how you spend money. Don't spend money in a way that is inconsistent with your money values. So that's our thought of the day. So the material for today, it's coming from what Dr. John DeMartini has said, but it's also coming from this book by Brent Kessel. It's not about the money. Over to you, Tafadzu.
I was just thinking about the financial appetite, that does it also probably depends, you were saying that you are a wealth creator. So when asked the question, if you get $1 billion, so if a person like me, when I get money and I think of going to Santorini, Antarctica, and enjoy the money because I'm working with someone who is a wealth creator, does that mean my financial appetite is not correct? Because there's
No, it doesn't mean that. So there is no wrong or right answer here. We're not basically saying the people that are involved in charity are inferior to the people that want to build wealth. We are wired differently, Tafazo. We created in a unique way. All of us are unique. But not only are we unique, we've also gone through different experiences and through different teachings. So you'll actually find that your money values are the sum total of the wiring that you have obtained as a child, but also the teachings that you have received, whether it's in a church or from other people. So you are the sum total of those values. And the way you handle money is always consistent with your values. So the short answer to your question is there is no wrong or right answers. We're not basically saying people who are empire builders are more superior than people who are not empire builders. All we're saying is we are wired different and we've gone through different experiences. But it's also very important to question our money beliefs, where we got them, from. Where did we get our money beliefs from? The other thing that I will also mention later on, Tafazo, is that our money beliefs can change over time. Through education. That's why I believe strongly in financial education. As you receive financial education, your money values will also change over time, and you'll begin to see what is valuable. The other thing that I would want to say, so my dominant financial architect is being a financial builder. The reason why I need to know about that is because I also need to know where my weaknesses are and what I need to do to balance my life. So what is always helpful, particularly in a marriage situation, is to have people that are quite different. Maybe the other person is a saver, the other person is a spender. In my view, those marriages work, much better than to have people who've got the same financial archetypes in a marriage. So number one, there is no wrong or right answer. But also number two, we can change our money values over time. Number three, when it comes to marriage situations, I think we may want to give this advice, Tafazo, because because this also is very, very important in building a lasting marriage. Sometimes what brings what makes a great couple are people who've got different money beliefs, and those people will sometimes tend to complement each other much better. Yeah. So that's my response to your question, Tafaz.
Thank you for that response, because I was going to ask how we reconcile people with different financial values in a relationship setup. But I think you've answered that. Tendai says, I feel it's good to groom your children for continuity. What are the money values and why are they important?
So we've defined what money values are. money values are basically an extension of your own personal values. We've got different values as individuals. These money values are a set of, your core beliefs and principles that shape your relationship with money and that drive or influence your money decisions. So we're talking about how do you spend money, how do you invest, how do you save, those kinds of things. So what are your core beliefs and principles that shape your relationship with money and that influence the decision around spending, saving, and investing? That's what we mean by money, values. So we've also made the point that every minute of the day that you live, your values, even if you are aware of it, influence how you save, how you spend, and how you invest. So even at a personal level, if you watch somebody's life, what time they go to bed, what time they wake up, what time, who do they spend their time with, all those decisions, all those choices and trade-offs that they make reinforce their values in one way or another. The reason why money values are very, very important, it's because money values are a way to allocate and prioritize your financial resources so that they reflect what is important to you, right? So if you want to see how you allocate money, how you prioritize your financial decision, it's always a reflection of your values. Let me give you a good example, Tafadzo. I've seen parents who are very concerned about their children's education. They will do everything to make sure that their children get the best education. They would send their children to the best universities that they are. But I've also seen parents who do not care about their children's education. In fact, the way they allocate their money resources is that they would rather drive the most expensive car, and their children would be going to a school, that is not so, fancy. Um, when you look at those two situations, Tafazo, and it's an allocation decision. It's a reflection of the values that those parents have. So the first parents who are allocating significant resources to the education of their children, maybe have got a value of, legacy, a value of investing in the next generation, and their children's education then determines how they spend their money. But then there are people who have got this value of being stars. It's all about them. It's not about the next generation. And so they are spending on themselves and they would want to be celebrated. Then there are people who care about issues like social justice or issues about the environment. And you'll see that because those are the issues that are important to them, they would tend to prioritize those causes through charitable donations. I've come across people who give 90% of what comes through their hands because they've got this value of caring for society. If you ask them for anything, they find it difficult to say no. Those are the values that they have. But here are the three things that I would want to say about money values. Number one, if you've got a value of pleasing people, which some people have, it's unlikely that you're going to build wealth over time. So if you're a people pleaser, you can't say no to people. It's unlikely that you're going to accumulate wealth over generation. So part of what you would need to be educated on and to be helped on is not living a life of pleasing people. I've rarely found that people pleasers, if you care about what people think about you, if you care about what your neighbors think about you, you would want to keep up with the Jones, it's unlikely that you're going to accumulate wealth, right? Secondly, if you are a bling bling person, and I'm not really against prosperity thinking, but you are all about accumulating wealth and buying the latest assets and living in the biggest houses and it's unlikely as well that you're going to accumulate wealth, because the people that accumulate wealth are the people that whose value is about growing money. They prioritize investment. They prioritize buying assets more than spending. That's the value that they have. They are not fearful about what tomorrow, has, what will happen tomorrow. Those people would rather accumulate assets. So let me give you an example, Tafazo. And I come across, this most of the time as I help people build wealth. So somebody would say, Themba, I had saved some money and I wanted to invest it. But then a relative of mine came and said that they're having problems. And then I just ended up giving them all the money that I had saved. And then in the next month, I would also saved, a sum of money to save. And then another relative of mine said to me, my children do not have school fees. Can you help me? And I felt sorry for them. And then I ended up giving them the money. As a result, I haven't saved money up to now because I just like giving people. If you are that kind of person who wants to please people, you want to solve everyone's problems, you're not going to build wealth. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just telling you now that the people that build wealth, who've got this value of building wealth, have got this value of not prioritizing. Because at the end of the day, let's just be very clear. The money that we get at a certain stage of our life is limited, and we would need to prioritize those resources through a budgeting process. And therefore, your values will dictate how you allocate those scarce resources. Let me give you a third example. There are people who've got this value of immediately gratifying themselves, whether it's food that they would want to have. Have you ever heard somebody, Tafazo, who says to you, we are all going to die? Because we are all going to die, I might as well spend the money now. There are people who say such statements. And when you analyze their statements, they would say statements like, I would want to live for the now. Everything that I get, I would want to spend because we don't have a life after tomorrow. Those kinds of people that can't delay their gratification will not build wealth. I'm not saying there's anything wrong, and I'm not judging necessarily those people. All I'm just trying to say is that don't come to me with a goal of making money and of building wealth, but you can't delay gratification. You can't say no to people. You would want to please everyone. And you do not have a certain discipline associated with building wealth. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, because building wealth is very simple. It's about delayed gratification. It's about accumulating assets rather than spending the money, with obviously the result that those assets will produce income. So all I'm just trying to say, for those of you who've got a value of wealth accumulation, place a premium on passive income. Building wealth is about passive income. In wealth accumulation, we frown upon people who finance their lifestyle from hard-earned money. Have you heard somebody who says, I've earned this money, let me go and drink it as if there is no tomorrow? You're not going to, to accumulate wealth if that is your thinking. Over to you, Tafazi.
Thank you for that insightful information. Someone once said, your emergence is not my emergence. I'm just quoting on when you're saying sometimes those people who think because they have a problem, someone must have a sleepless night over the problem and they must help. So next time when you ask for help from somebody and they say no, it's just a reminder that your emergence is not everyone's emergence. Because sometimes those with money
still on that, Tafazo, still on that, I was held by a certain pastor whom I, was listening to. What this pastor said is that I've got a certain sum of money that I have, earmarked for emergency purposes. Even if you come crying to me and saying, I've got a problem, I'm not going to give you that kind of money. It's for me and it's for my emergency purposes. The reason why I'm mentioning this, Tafazo, I've come across so many situations where people say, I've got an emergency, I can't build an emergency fund. I've ended up depleting my emergency fund. It's for you to create an emergency fund, you need to have this value of wealth creation, and it's just that simple. If you are a people pleaser, you live for the now, you will never build the emergency fund that we always talk about.
How can people find out about their money values, and can you give examples of some financial archetypes?
Financial archetypes that we spoke about. So Tafadzo, the short answer to your question is obviously we're reading this book by Brent Kessel today. Brent Kessel runs a company called the company that I have referred to, Abacus, wealth managers. So you can go to his website, www.abacus.com. In fact, let me just try to, give you. It's called www.abacuswealth.com. On that, website. So let me, go over that website again. www.abacuswealth.com. Right. If you go to that website, you'll actually find that he's got a quiz there. And on that quiz, he asked the question, what is your financial archetype? And he will, have you answer certain questions on that quiz, and then you will provide him with your email address, and then he will give you, what your financial archetype, is. Another way of finding your value, you can go to Dr. John Domatini's website. He's got what he calls a values, determination exercise, which you can find also on his blogs. You can even Google Dr. John DeMartini values exercise. You will come across a tool that he has determined. So that's a practical way of finding out about your money values. But let's just discuss the concept, because to me, it's before we even talk about certain tools that people have developed. Let's just be clear on the concept itself. You do not necessarily have to go to those websites to determine, your money values. All you need to do is to reflect. Probably just watch your budget over time. So let's just establish the concept. The concept is very simple, Tafadzo. Every person is different. And because every person is different, we've got different money values. And there's no wrong or right answer here. But the best way to determine your money values is to reflect on how you have spent money. And the reason why you need to reflect, Tafadzo, and let me explain this concept to all of us. Brent says it's not about the money. And I totally agree with him, because money is an outward expression of your inner you. So your inner you, which is the values that you have about money, determine, how you spend money and whether you accumulate wealth over time. So it's very simple. If I see you broke, if I see you struggling, it's not that you do not have money. It's not that money is scarce. It's because the beliefs that you have about money, and your views about money, may be flawed, or may not be those views and beliefs that allow you to accumulate money over time. It's just that simple, which is why it may actually be a useful exercise, Tafadzo, to reflect. And the way people reflect is different. Some people would want to meditate. Some people would want to journal. Some people would want to talk with a trusted friend or an advisor whom they are going to use as a sounding board. All those, activities or avenues of reflecting are also quite acceptable. But when you reflect, you are basically asking yourself questions such as, what is important to me? Is it my health? Is it my family? Is it my spirituality? Is it my career? For example, Tafanzo, let me give you another example about values. Sometimes you'll hear a person who says, I struggle tithing. Because you would know, Tafazo, that we advocate for people to tithe, to separate the first 10% of their income and give it to their church and give it to, organizations that have got a worthy cause. People that have got that struggle to tithe have got, value issues. If your value is about spirituality, and spirituality matters quite a lot, and you really are that kind of person who says, everything that I have, it's because God blessed me. In other words, you've got a value of spirituality. You recognize that there is a God who gives the power to people to get wealth. Those people that have got a value around spirituality, and spirituality is important to them, will never struggle with tithing. Because, in my view, tithing is an absolute recognition that there is a God out there. It's part of how you worship God. And so, if you are struggling with tithing and you are arguing about should people be tithing, it's fine. You don't just have a value around spirituality. And if spirituality is important to you, you will tithe, even if, because sometimes I get questions such as, do I tithe when I've got debt? Do I tithe if my mother is sick? Look, when your mother is sick, when you've got a tithe to present before God, you need to prioritize. And whether you're going to send the tithe to church or whether you're going to give money to your mother, it's all about the values that you have, because your values will dictate how you prioritize. But if you've got a value around spirituality and around worship, you'll never struggle. And you will say, may God heal my mother. But for now, I will send my time, to church. And Tafazo, I know this is a controversial subject, but I may need to just say something which is very important. When you tithe, you're not tithing to a man, because sometimes people confuse this thing. Obviously, the eventual destination or address of that tithe is the name of a church. But the way we tithe is because we are spiritual people, and you're actually giving that money to God much more than giving it to a person. Some people will say, what if that person that I give my money to will abuse it? No, if you have given it to God and if they abuse that money, it's their problem. It's not my problem. What I have done is I've spent my money in accordance with my values. And therefore, the money that I have spent is a reflection of my values. So your question was, how do I determine my values? You determine your values by reflecting on what is important to you. And you sort of come up with a hierarchy of what is important to you. In my hierarchy, it's about God, it's about family, and it's about empire building. It's just that simple. I don't have a value around the clothes that, at one point of us, I thought I was a strange person, because people would ask you, but you've got money. Why are you not putting on, branded clothes? No, I don't have a value for branded clothes. If I've got money, I buy shares. That's me. If you've got money and you think that branded clothes are very important, then go and buy your branded clothes. What is important to me is wealth accumulation. But in my priority of values, it's very simple. It's God first, and therefore I will send my time. Whether I'm in debt or I'm not in debt, tithing is very important. Secondly, my family comes first. So even if I've got limited resources, the welfare of my children is very important. And then thirdly, it's about wealth accumulation and building an empire. So I don't put a value on consumable. People that have got, a consumer mindset. And I'm not saying, remember what we've said, Tafazo, there is no wrong or right in this thing. And I'm not necessarily passing judgment on anybody. All I'm just trying to say is that there are certain values that are not consistent with wealth building, and we need to be, important. Then, as you determine your values, it's also important to reflect on who is important to me. So think of your relatives, think of your friends, think of your. Oh, by the way, Tafazo, I've come across people who spend more on their pets than on their relatives. In fact, there is actually a publicized story of a very rich man who left a huge inheritance to his dog. And the dog inherited more than the grandchildren and more than the children, to such an extent that the grandchildren went to court to change the will because they said, look, this is nonsensical. How can a dog inherit more money than us? I don't know why that person made that particular decision, but that particular decision was informed by who is important to them. I've come across people where their pets are actually more important to them than their children or even other relatives. And they would spend more on their pets. I came across somebody who says, I spend more on my dog than I even spend on myself. And that person says, my dog has got a medical aid and I don't have a medical aid. I just found it very strange. But strange as it might seem to be, it's, their spending of money is a reflection of their values. Another way of determining your values is asking yourself the question, if I had all the money in the world, how would I spend my money? When you reflect on that question, you will inevitably come up with a list of what is valuable to you. So another question that you can ask yourself, if I could move the dial in one or two areas to change the world, what would those areas be, right? Because, the answer to those questions might involve sharing resources with people or supporting a cause. What I have found, and in the people that I follow, is that they have got this value of making a difference, and they would want to use money as a tool to make a difference in this world. So those are ways. I've given you a practical way of determining your value. I've given you those websites that you can go to, but you don't necessarily have to go to a website to determine your money value. All you need to do is to do a deep introspection, asking yourself those questions. What is important to me? Who is important to me? If I had all the money in the world, how would I spend, that money? And how would I spend my time? Because once you answer those questions, you will get to the core of what is important to you and the beliefs that you have. Tafato, I see that our time is gone. Probably what we can do is to continue with this discussion on money values and probably to take questions from our audience around money values. And probably in our next installment, we may want to then talk about the financial archetypes that Brent Kessel talks about, because that's very, very important, so that we can reflect on values. At the end of the day, I don't want to teach you about accumulating wealth when your very values are not consistent with accumulating wealth. If your value is about bling bling and prosperity thinking, there's nothing wrong with that value. All I'm just trying to say, it's not consistent. Do the things that are consistent with the values that you have. But having said that, values can be changed over time. If you would want to get hold of me, the easiest way is to get hold of me via LinkedIn. So you just type in Themba Duplex Mazibuko on LinkedIn and you can communicate with me. But I just feel that we must have another session on values, and we can then deep dive around that. And I must also mention, I never help and coach somebody on money before I make sure that they've got the right money beliefs and the right values that are consistent with wealth accumulation. We need to determine your values first. Once we determine your values, even when it comes to budgeting, when I teach people about budgeting, I then make sure that you budget in terms of your values. But we cannot have a misalignment between how you spend your money and what your values are. Over to you, Tafadzwa, to conclude our discussion.
Thank you, Themba, for your time and your contribution. We had a question, so we'll put it over to the next.
Maybe we can take the question, Tafadzwa. What was the question? Oh, we don't have time. That's fine. Let's defer it to next week.
Yes, it was just in that I had said that if you hear of misappropriation of funds at church, should you continue? So I'm sure that question was based on the tithe, but I think we can take it over to the next session on values and money. Thank you guys for joining. Pastor Richard, Bishop Richard Master from Zimbabwe, we appreciate you. Mr. Mnyara Zimtlolo, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon, Tendai and everyone else. I'm just mentioning the people I'm seeing on the comment section, but everyone, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon. If you want to get hold of Themba, as he mentioned earlier, you can connect with him on his LinkedIn, or you can write us an email if you want Themba to be part of your event. Itafadzwa Mazibuko Speaks.co.za. And we also have YouTube channels, The Dream That I Was Worth Fighting For, and Manage Your Finances Like a Black Belt. Let's grow together. Your dream is worth fighting for. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Cheers.